The courtroom was overflowing, not just with lawyers and meta, but with a tension so thick it felt electric. It was the kind of charged atmosphere that only appears when something monumental is on the brink. Everyone sensed today wouldn't be ordinary. At the defense table, Diddy sat straight-backed, his eyes fixed on the judge's seat, while his legal team rustled papers, leaned in, and spoke in hushed tones. They weren't merely preparing, they were steeling themselves. As the judge entered, everyone stood. A heavy hush blanketed the room. She peered over her glasses, scanning from prosecution to defense. "We'll now address the motion to suppress evidence," she announced. What came next, no one expected. Diddy's lead counsel rose, his voice measured yet razor-sharp. "Your Honor, we respectfully move to exclude the digital files just introduced by the prosecution. These documents were not obtained under a legitimate warrant and risk unfair biasing of the jury." A murmur swept through the gallery. Reporters exchanged looks. Legal experts whispered into their microphones, suppressing evidence. But the prosecutor stood her ground. "Your Honor," she began, stepping forward confidently, "the defense has had knowledge of this material for 15 days. It was secured under a supplemental warrant and processed legally. This is tactical, not legal." The judge declined slightly, her expression hard to read, fingers tapping the benchier rhythm that signaled contemplation, but not in their favor. "Before we go any further into this pivotal moment, be sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and click the bell icon. That way, you won't miss any of our new uploads." Back to the courtroom. What makes this moment explosive isn't just the contents of the files, but what they reportedly reveal. Encrypted messages between Diddy and key figures in the investigation. Metadata that clashes with earlier alibis. And the possibility that this could dismantle the defense's entire argument. But the real shock? The timing. Why raise objections now? Why wait until these files are introduced to protest their validity? Clearly aware of the gravity, Diddy's lawyer pressed on. This data was acquired under dubious circumstances. Accepting it would jeopardize the trial's fairness. The judge remained skeptical. Her voice turned cold. "I will not tolerate manipulation in this courtroom. If either party believes they can control this process, they are gravely mistaken. Proceed with your arguments." What began as a procedural debate had turned into a high-stakes standoff involving strategy, truth, and courtroom ethics. As cameras captured Diddy's expression, he remained unreadable, but inside. Even he knew this wasn't just about digital evidence. It was a power struggle. A test of whether justice would be defined by truth, forward by legal maneuvering. When the judge asked for arguments, the atmosphere shifted. The prosecution acted fast, establishing their position. The messages were recovered from a mirrored device surrendered by one of the defendant's associates. The prosecutor started. The device was handed over voluntarily and underwent a full forensic review. Nothing was planted or altered. What the defense calls prejudicial is, in reality, incriminating because it's factual. There were no audible gasps, but facial expressions said it all. Jurors, though instructed to remain neutral, showed subtle reactions. Reporters scribbled faster. Diddy's attorney narrowed his gaze, tracking every word and gesture from the opposing side. The defense rose again. If this material is introduced, the jury will be exposed to incomplete digital fragments that lack full context. It risks misdirection. My client's right to a fair trial must not be undermined by sensational content. Yet, even as he spoke, the prosecution submitted evidence. The court clerk distributed the materials to the judge and defense. What looked like ordinary printouts, lines of code, and time-stamped messages carried enormous implications. The objection wasn't merely procedural, it was driven by fear. Fear of what these documents might reveal. Fear of what they could confirm. The judge skimmed the pages, her expression growing colder. She stopped, looking directly at the defense. "You were given access. You received mirrored copies. Why didn't you raise this during pretrial motions?" Her tone dipped. "Explain." The defense attorney hesitated a moment too long. "Your Honor," he said at last, "we were led to believe the material wouldn't be presented. This feels more like a performance than a legal pursuit. The judge tilted her head. So your plan was to gamble and hope it didn't surface? That's not how this courtroom operates. Silence descended, the kind that suffocates. It wraps everyone in the weight of legal brinkmanship. Suddenly, Diddy leaned toward his attorney and whispered something. The lawyer stood once more. We request a sidebar, but the judge was done. No, she said, her tone unyielding. This conversation stays on the record. Unless you have a fresh legal basis for this objection, I will treat it as a stalling tactic and move forward. She turned back to the prosecution. Continue. And just like that, the momentum shifted again. The defense, once calm and calculating, now appeared cornered. Prosecution advanced, ready to strike. The prosecutor approached the bench like someone who knew they held a loaded gun and intended to fire. Holding up the documents, she began breaking them down one by one. These aren't merely messages, she said, pacing. They're instructions, responses, communications that raise questions about motive, coordination, and intent. She highlighted one exchange. This was sent less than 2 hours after law enforcement searched a property tied to the defendant. In it, an associate talks about wiping drives and clearing out anything related to the summer. Her eyes met. The judge's. The summer is when the alleged incident occurred. The room held still. Even Diddy's supporters in the back row seemed shaken. He appeared calmed, but his fingers tapped steadily on the table, the only giveaway of the storm beneath. The defense quickly objected. Speculation, the lawyer shouted. There's no proof that the message pertains to this case. The prosecutor pressed on. Let's look at the next one, she said. Here, the same associate asks if club footage was deleted. Hours later, surveillance from that club key location in our case was found erased. Coincidence? Judge remained silent, listening carefully. The prosecutor's case was gaining weight with every word. She didn't stop at messages. She began introducing testimony. One recipient of these texts has already sworn under oath they were told to clean house and protect the boss. She added, we've matched those statements with time-stamped data. This isn't speculation, it's a pattern. Another objection from the defense hearsay. Overruled. The prosecutor kept going, her pace unrelenting. Diddy leaned in again to his lawyer, who stood. Your Honor, we ask that this evidence be reviewed in chambers before it reaches the jury. There are privacy issues and possible digital rights violations. The judge leaned forward, clearly. Displeased, counsel. If those were your concerns, you should have brought them up earlier. The court allowed plenty of time. The evidence stands. That was the moment the defense's confidence cracked. But what came next stunned me even more. The prosecutor held up a blurred screenshot. Identity is hidden, but context clear. This is from a group chat, she explained. It includes not just Diddy's associates, but members of his security. One message, allegedly from Mr. Gene Deal, says, and, I quote, everything we discussed is taken care of. Keep him quiet, and off the grid until this dies down. The gallery stirred. The judge lifted her gavel, but didn't strike. The prosecutor continued. That message was sent from a number registered to Gene Deal's personal account. It's been verified by our forensic team. A heavy pause followed. The judge addressed the room. We'll reassess for 10 minutes. When we return, we'll proceed with formal evidence submission. The room barely breathed. What had just unfolded wasn't a normal legal debate. It was a slow, methodical peeling back of a story Diddy's team had fought desperately to protect. When court resumed, the tension was now flammable. Everyone knew the stakes had just spiked. The judge took her seat, her demeanor more severe than ever. The prosecution resumed with surgical clarity. That message from Mr. Deal is not an isolated one, she said. We've tracked related texts over 3 days. They point to an organized effort to alter digital records, tamper with surveillance, and intimidate witnesses. She directed attention to the screen beside the bench. Texts appeared one after the other, matched 2 movements within Diddy's circle. One read, tell him to keep quiet, it's already bad. Minutes later, money was transferred to that same individual someone seen at the club the night of the alleged event. This is circumstantial, the defense shouted. There's no direct connection to my client, but the prosecutor was unrelenting. The account that sent the money is owned by a company registered solely to Mr. Combs. The recipient, the former employee, left the country after receiving $50,000. She paused. The connections aren't vague. They're direct. The judge leaned in. Counsel, do you have solid proof Mr. Combs authorized that payment to silence a witness? The prosecutor didn't blink. Not directly. What we do have is a sequence of events, communications, finances, and sworn statements that align too closely to ignore. The timeline tells a story. From the crowd, low murmurs. One woman held her press badge like a lifeline. A man leaned in, recording every syllable like he was documenting history. Diddy sat still, no longer projecting confidence. He wasn't grinning or slouching. He looked distant, cold. Then came the twist no one saw coming. Audio. This was legally obtained, the prosecutor said. It features two individuals recalling a conversation with Mr. Combs about handling the situation. It's muffled, but the names are clear. The court fell into silence as the tape played. At first, garbled speech, then clearer. No phones. No questions. Just do it. A second voice. We wiped it all. You, me, deal, everyone. You. Know how it goes. The defense stood instantly. Objection. Unauthenticated. We've not had time to verify. The judge was unfazed. This was submitted in discovery. If your team missed it, that's not a basis for exclusion. The lead attorney flushed. Someone on their side had missed a critical detail. Now it was too late. The judge paused the audio. She faced the jury. Disregard speculation. Focus only on facts. No assumptions until full context is presented. But the damage was already done. This wasn't mere drama. It was direct damning evidence. For the first time, Diddy's circle didn't just feel exposed. They sounded exposed. The courtroom had changed. It's not just in tone, but in weight. A cold heaviness settled over everyone. The playback ended, but the atmosphere remained. The line had been crossed. It was no longer about legal maneuvers. It was about revelations. Raw, unfiltered, and crushing. Diddy's lead lawyer stood again, this time slower. Your Honor, he said, his voice dulled, we object to continued use of the audio without voice authentication. We haven't verified our identities. The prosecutor was ready. Voice print analysis is underway, she said. But 3 witnesses, including one cooperating with federal agents, have already identified the voices. And the timeline syncs exactly with phone logs and surveillance. The judge, expression hard as stone, asked, have these witnesses signed affidavits? Yes, Your Honor. And they're ready for cross-examination. That was it. The defense understood. For today, at least, they were losing. Every argument was being countered, overruled. Their case was slipping away. Diddy, he was no longer looking at the prosecutor. He was staring at the ground. Frozen, the prosecutor wasn't done. Your Honor, we request permission to introduce exterior surveillance footage from the club. The footage revealed the same associate from the previous messages, stepping into the building with a bag and walking out without it. In under 10 minutes on the very night the club's internal surveillance vanished. The screen brightened and clear but distinguishable, showing a man known to be within. Diddy's close circle entering through a back service door at 2:13 a.m., carrying a medium-sized duffel bag. By 2:22 a.m., he exits. No bag in sight. Where's the bag? The prosecutor asked, her voice cutting through the silence, which she allowed to hang deliberately. The defense immediately stood. There's no proof of what was inside or where it went. This is speculative, a distraction. But the room wasn't convinced. Even jurors who had been expressionless began trading glances. The puzzle pieces were snapping into place too neatly to ignore. This wasn't an illusion. This was ignition. And everyone felt the blaze. Then came the most damning blow of the day. The prosecutor produced a printed email. We have an internal message between club security and a private investigation firm employed by Mr. Combs's team, dated 1 day after the incident. It requests access to the surveillance system and specifically asks for deletion of hallway footage. Between 1:45 and 2:30 a.m., she entered it into evidence. The wording was precise. The timeline was an exact match. The request originated from a masked email under one of Mr. Combs's known shell entities. This wasn't just cleaning up, it was orchestrated erasure. The defense didn't stand. Not a word. Not at that moment. The courtroom sat still in the kind of frozen tension that only truth could bring. The judge reclined into her chair, allowing the silence to stretch. No gavel, no lecture. Just the sheer gravity of what had unfolded sinking into every corner of the room. This wasn't mere documentation. It was a narrative, a sequence of erased footage, quiet commands, and strategic operations. And at the center sat a man who had crafted a public empire, now watching it collapse beneath sterile fluorescent lights in federal court. As the courtroom clock edged toward noon, no one dared glance at it. The focus was razor sharp. The prosecution had done the impossible, commanding not just the narrative, but the very room. And they weren't done yet. "Your Honor," the prosecutor began, voice calm but firm, "we request permission to introduce a surprise witness." The phrase sent a ripple through the gallery. Diddy's lawyers conferred in quick, anxious murmurs. The judge's gaze narrowed. This court does not allow ambush tactics. "Who is this witness, and why weren't they disclosed in advance?" Holding up a sealed envelope, the prosecutor answered, "This person came forward within the past 48 hours.
Oh.
Due to the nature of their statement, they requested protective measures. Their identity was submitted under seal, and they are currently waiting in the witness room." The judge, cautious but intrigued, reviewed the sealed file. Her face revealed nothing. After a long pause, she finally nodded. "Very well. Bring in the witness, but if I sense any delay or deception, this court will respond accordingly." All eyes turned as the door opened. The shift in energy was instant. It wasn't just who entered, it was who he used to be. A former security consultant, once working directly for Diddy's private staff during the key time frame. He didn't walk in like a polished witness, no slick suit, no media-ready appearance, just a plain shirt, tired eyes, and the weight of hard choices. He was sworn in, then faced the jury. "I was contracted to sweep properties for bugs, digital threats, and information leaks," he said. "But that wasn't the only job I was given." The prosecutor prompted him. "Tell the court what that job entailed." He took a breath. "I was told to remove and destroy anything connecting Mr. Combs to the location in question. That included emails, logs, visitor lists. I was instructed to ensure there were no backups. I was paid well to make sure nothing remained, and I did." The entire courtroom inhaled as one, like a collective breath held too long. The defense stood. "Hearsay, Your Honor. We need verification, a chain of custody." Something more than words. But the prosecutor was prepared. "We have payment records from a company in Mr. Combs's financial web. The timing aligns perfectly with when the witness says the deletion occurred. He's also submitted serial numbers of destroyed equipment, which match empty fields in the surveillance database." The judge's face was stunned, not shocked, but weighted by what was landing in her courtroom. The witness wasn't done. "I wasn't the only one," he said. "There was another team working simultaneously. I don't know their names, we worked in zones, but I heard someone mention Mr. Gene Deal during the process. That single line pushed the trial across a line no one could retreat from. This was no longer courtroom chess, it was unraveling." Diddy hadn't moved, still like stone. But for the first time, a twitch appeared in his jaw, a clench in his hand under the table. Everyone knew what that meant. He did too. The defense tried to intervene again, asking for a sidebar. But the judge dismissed it. "You've stalled long enough," she said. "The jury will hear this witness in full." The man on the stand leaned forward. "I'm not here because of guilt. I'm here because it got too dark. I don't know everything that happened that night, but I know what I helped erase. And I know someone's truth was buried in that data." The same silence returned, the kind that had followed the audio, the video, the messages. But this one was heavier. It carried the weight of confession. The truth wasn't whispered now. It echoed. The courtroom had become a reckoning ground. No more performance. No more misdirection. Every person present realized they were witnessing the collapse of something once untouchable. This wasn't merely a legal proceeding anymore. It was a confrontation between truth and power, and the silence that once protected them. The surprise witness finished his statement, still lingering like smoke from a controlled burn. And just when it felt like the intensity had peaked, the judge did something no one expected. She leaned in and addressed the defense directly. "I feel obligated to raise a concern," she said. "Given today's testimony and your repeated attempts to suppress evidence without timely objection, this court must now consider whether your conduct borders on obstruction." The air chilled. The lead defense attorney rose, voice wavering, but measured. "Your Honor, we've stayed within our legal limits. We're defending our client's rights as protected by the Constitution." The judge's voice turned from firm to frosty. "Defending a client is not the same as distorting a trial's integrity. Warn this courtroom respect this process or face the consequences." She then addressed the jury. "Let me be absolutely clear. This court will not permit the concealment of truth. We will continue with this evidence. And should further attempts be made to derail proceedings, I will impose sanctions and consider contempt of court." This wasn't just the day's turning point, it was the trial's pivot. For weeks, Diddy's lawyers had danced around evidence, using delay tactics and late objections. But now the court had drawn the line, and across that line was a towering structure of messages, insiders, at a defense unraveling. Then the moment that sealed it all, the judge called a recess. Before anyone moved, she spoke directly to Diddy. "Mr. Combs, you are now formally warned. Any future interference, direct or indirect, with this trial's integrity will result in personal penalties. Should new evidence of witness tampering, data manipulation, or obstruction arise, you will be held accountable." Diddy gave a slight nod, stiff, silent, but it said everything. Outside, the world was watching. The judge's warning echoed, instantly splashed across the media, spreading like fire through live updates. This wasn't a lecture, it was a spotlight. And for the first time in decades, it pointed not at Diddy's carefully curated image, but at his accountability. Inside, the prosecutor sat, composed, grounded, not gloating. They knew this wasn't just progress, it was a permanent shift. The jury, once uncertain, now leaned forward, attentive, laser-focused. They had seen the records, heard the voices, and now they had heard the court's stance. The gap between legal strategy and obstruction had been exposed. The judge's statement didn't just move the trial forward, it rebalanced it. From now on, every motion, every witness, every exhibit would be examined under a new lens. Not of influence, but of truth. Of legacy, but of law. And for the first time since this case began, Diddy was no longer directing the story. The court was. Its spotlight was squarely on him. When the court reconvened for the day's final session, the air had changed. There was no going back. The judge's warning still reverberated, not as formality, but as a marker. The age of legal showmanship had ended. Every statement now carried weight. Every step was monitored. The prosecution returned, not boastful, but determined. They knew what they were building wasn't drama, it was structured. Layered in secrecy, power, and fear, but no longer beyond reach. The next witness looked unremarkable, but carried immense weight. A digital forensic analyst collected sharp, surgical. He detailed the recovery of metadata, deleted files, timestamps, and inconsistencies with prior testimony. "We recovered partial communication logs from a wiped server," he explained. "Though the content was removed, the timestamps and file sizes prove high-volume data transfers occurred right after specific red flag conversations among Mr. Combs's associates." The room hung on every word, each fact unraveling the narrative. Thread by thread, the expert showed server snapshots. "Destruction leaves traces," he said. "And those traces, when examined together, form a clear picture. Then came the hammer. We also found an internal directive to erase all backups local and cloud. The sender's address was traced to a now-dissolved company under Mr. Combs's holdings. The defense tried to object, but the momentum was unstoppable. The court wasn't just reviewing evidence, it was witnessing truth. Live, as the session closed, the judge addressed the court one last time. All motions relating to today's testimony will be reviewed. But let this be a reminder. No matter how powerful or well-defended a person may be, this courtroom belongs to no one. It belongs to the law, and the law cannot be bent, stalled, or erased. Her words landed with gravity. She looked slowly at both sides. We will reconvene tomorrow. Be prepared. The gavel fell, and silence followed, not awkward, but profound. The kind of silence that comes with realization. The veil had been lifted, not just on a defense, but on a myth. Outside, reporters scrambled, headlines exploded, social media buzzed. The public wasn't just hungry for scandal anymore, they were looking for consequence. And inside that courtroom, one thing was now undeniable. This trial was no longer about one act, or one file, or one man. It was about a system of silence in the moment it began to break. The warning had been spoken, the facts were exposed, and the shield that once protected power shattered.